I'm worried for Glaceon, guys. Of all the Eevee's evolved forms, it is the clear favorite from me, and we're really pulling for you to do it right, Tencent. I'm actually a bit excited to see it possibly being an attacker, though I do see the very real potential for it as a defender. And also for the purpose of this video, I will be referring to Glaceon as a he, as with a 7-to-1 male to female gender ratio from the main games. It's just more likely what it is. Sorry guys, but most Glaceon and actually most Eevee forms are male. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another one of our discussion videos. Or at least with this one, it is a Unite discussion and speculation video. This time focusing around Glaceon. Now, I've never been the biggest fan of the Eevee evolutionary family, but Glaceon is distinctly my favorite of the entire branch of them. I absolutely love it. It is by far my favorite, and I'm really hoping that Tencent does this thing justice. So, into the speculation part. If you see my previous video on speedsters, which may or may not be up by this point, you'll know that the immense fondness that Tencent has for putting out attackers, either attacker class characters or all-arounders with a heavy focus on offense. Even some of the defenders that have been added recently have been a bit more geared into being aggressive with their attacking power, such as Trevenant, but the clear fondness for attackers is very realistically there. And defenders have been added, however, not as many of them and not nearly with the same frequency as attackers and all-arounders, which are offense-based. And this does stem largely from how more offense-based characters are significantly more profitable and highly marketable. And that's actually the reason I am very glad to say it is realistically possible Glaceon will be an attacker. Now, again, I'm going to be referring to attacker not as the role of attacker, so with the red background, but as attacker as an offense-based character, so either an offensive all-arounder, or as more offensive-based all-arounder, or strictly an attacker class character. It's just easier to say attacker instead of offense, because it's just what I'm used to saying, but a little bit of a side point. But I don't... Now, attacker, I also feel, is not the only option that Glaceon has open to it. I think distinctly as a defender is a very realistic opportunity for it, and given some of the recent updates, I think they could be speccing the game into almost wanting this potential defender Glaceon set I'm proposing. Again, back to what I was saying about me being okay with it being an attacker. I know a lot of people are not the most fond of it being an attacker, but I mean, like everyone, I like DPS, I like damage output, I like getting those high KOs, I like getting those high assist numbers, I like seeing my damage numbers be pretty high by the end of the match. Which is why I'm actually okay with Glaceon being a potential attacker, because I like damage. I like damage. And I also do see it as being, I also see it more likely as being an all-arounder class character than strictly attacker class character for reasons I'm going to be getting into right now, and that is, they generally have followed the main series stat distribution, or at least main series elements of a Pokemon. Pokemon that have, either priority moves or are naturally very fast, fit into speedster class, or just have very, critical hit rate for rapid damage, speedsters. Generally more middle of the road attacker characters that are not super fast, generally fall in the all-arounder category. Defenders are generally slow, bulky Pokemon, and support Pokemon are Pokemon that generally have a much more support-oriented toolkit. And that's why I think Glaceon is not going to be an attacker, because Glaceon in the main series is actually a very slow Pokemon for what it is, but it's also notably bulkier than many of its Eevee brethren, that it possesses a very high special attacking stat, 130, in fact one of the highest of any special attacking attack stats, including of course legendaries, from Generation 4. And it does possess relatively high bulk for being this kind of an attacker, but as we have seen, relatively lower speed. This is why I think it will fit more into the category of an all-arounder than as an attacker, because attackers, with the exception of really something like Duraludon, is generally pretty quick. They have a generally high walking speed or dashes, or all around are generally a little more mobile. Again, Duraludon is an exception, but more often than not, it is going to be quicker characters. Again, like Cinderace, Charizard, Cinderace, Greninja. But The other reason why I think it could be, again, more of a defender is, again, looking at its stats, it has more meat on its bones than its, Eevee brethren. It is notably bulkier. It's not as bulky as something, say, like Sylveon to a degree, or the unholy Umbreon with its brick wall stats, but it does have more meat on its bones, or, I guess, ice on its frame. It also is worth noting that all-arounders do have a little more bulk than their attacking counterparts. Again, this comes with cost of speed, generally, but they generally have a little more bulk. Again, Duraludon is the exception. But now that we've gone over a little bit of stats as well as, it's also worth noting that, yes, both prior Eevee added forms are attackers. It could be a thing that they're going to make all of them attackers, but I realistically don't see that possible. Again, Umbreon's a brick wall. Wouldn't really make sense as an attacker. But stats are half, and potentially even less than half of the whole story. There's moves. And this is why I believe it will be suited more as a defender than an attacker or all-arounder offense base. Because the nature of the way Ice-type moves in the game have actually been used suit it significantly more as a defender. They are much more, apt for a defender. Now, yes, they could hypothetically add these moves and make them completely different than the way they had implemented Ice moves prior, but realistically, we're going to be using similar move comparisons to what exists in the game, rather than thinking of these more outside-the-box ideas of, they could do this thing with the move. It's like, we're going to go generally more based on what already exists, as well as my hypothesis about its meta functionality and why its purpose for introduction is. And what I mean by this Ice-type functionality is Alola Ninetales. It is much bemoaned that it doesn't feel much like an attacker role. It's very slow for movement speed, it is stiff in movement, its kit is significantly more focused on disruption and support than all-around attacking. It likely falls into an attacker category because, at the time of its release, Aurora Veil making every attack a boosted attack made it seem more suited as an attacker due to its offensive presence, but over time it has become vastly more a tech and crowd control Pokemon with Dazzling Gleam, even things like Blizzard and Avalanche blocking and pushing away Pokemon. It is significantly more functional as a support Pokemon or a crowd controller rather than an actual out-and-out attacker, along the likes of, say, Duraludon, Delphox, and Cinderace or Greninja, which are significantly more damage-based. It's much more of this hybrid defender-supporter, which is why I think, paired up with, of course, Mamoswine, who is a dedicated defender, I believe that Ice is more suited to being a defender typing with its implementations. Now, again, we can't say, Ice is indicative of being a defender, as after all, we have ground types, which are defenders, all-arounders, steel types, we have, attacker steel types. Just because typing is generally one thing or the other doesn't mean they will always be that way. We do have, Defender Snorlax, which is a normal type. We have Defender Greedent, which is a normal type. Support Blissey, which is a normal type. So I don't think that's unreasonable to have other normal type Pokemon that are not them. I just think it is more indicative of potential ways that Pokemon could be. But again, as I've mentioned before, damage does sell. And I feel that that will also, again, play a significant factor when it comes to what Glaceon's functionality will be beyond its meta functionality. And again, if you enjoy what you see here, do not forget to subscribe for more. We do a lot of these discussion videos, and you guys out there are the ones that support this to make this a possibility. So if you enjoy what you see here, or, you want to give your own thoughts, leave a subscribe, comment, and like. It helps everything out, and I enjoy your feedback. I could not make this without your guys' feedback. Make sure to edit that in right here. But now, let's get on to some theory crafting. And my ideas for how it is possible some of the moves will be implemented, based upon existing move functionalities. And yes, all of this is done with the understanding that in Unite, 2 or more Pokemon can have the same name move, but it will perform radically different. Look at Flame Charge on Talonflame, Cinderace, and Delphox, or Psyshock on, Espeon and Gardevoir. They are the same named move, but function drastically different. So what I have done is I have assembled a list of moves based on what I believe to be the most likely options for a all-arounder attacker set and a separate list for defender. For a starting move, I am assuming Charm and Swift will be the starting move options, as both Espeon and Sylveon had a status move in the form of Baby Doll Eyes and Growl, as well as Swift. So I feel that that tradition may be kept, and we will be starting with that assumption as Eevee's starting kit for Glaceon. I feel that Swift would perform more similar to Espeon's in that it is a directional thing where they all go at once. However, I don't believe would be the crossing over at a specific point type move. I feel it would take more after Sylveon's in that respect of they all shoot forward in their own sort of separate lanes for linear attack, but they shoot forward at the same time, so that you have like 4 stars rushing forward at the same time, rather than with Sylveon's, they go choo-choo-choo-choo. They go each separately, or Espeon's where they all 3 of them cross over at a specific designated point. These are the moves I have assumed likely will be possible for, of course, attackers on one side and defender on the other. They are in order of what I believe is most likely. At the top, and least likely is more towards the bottom. They look largely similar, but there is an explanation for why the differences are there. Clearly, Blizzard and Ice Beam are the natural high places. I think these are the most likely, as these are fairly standard, simple moves that would perform very similarly to what the moves we are familiar with. Linear attack moves, of course, Blizzard would be a much larger, wide area. Again, it can do a little Ninetales Blizzard that potentially could either push Pokemon away or just simply freeze them in place. Whereas Ice Beam, I think, more likely is a bit of a linear laser beam that potentially also could freeze Pokemon. Though Blizzard, I also think, has a distinct possibility to be drastically different. Think something of an area around Glaceon rather than a linear attack, thinking akin to Zero Aura's Discharge, where it's a circle around the user, or Trevenant's Curse, where it's a circle around the user where it could potentially freeze Pokemon and slow them down in the area, and just deal damage while moving. I guess also Venusaur's Petal Dance would be a bit of a closer approximation for that. Before I also progress, I feel that it is a very likely secondary effect for all of these moves to have either a slowdown, a freeze, like Alola Ninetales and Mamoswine's move. Potentially a stun for certain ones, but I feel a slowdown or a stun is more likely. Or, again, freeze, which functions sort of as a trap, similar to Pikachu's Electro Web, I think is more common than, things such as, health restoration like Lucario's Extreme Speed, or a speed boost like Charizard's Flamethrower. Hail is the interesting one. And this is why I expect Articuno was actually added into the Catch-em mode. I've long held the belief that the Catch-em mode is essentially a tech demo and trial run for new Pokemon moves or potential patches and buffs to existing moves. And that it's their way of essentially having the audience test out these new or altered moves in a much more en masse environment than testing in sort of a lab. I think it can have, similar to Articuno's Hail, it is a circle around the user, though of course drastically reduced in size. It would slow down enemies, deal damage, potentially heal the user. I don't believe it would heal the user though. It could though, because again, Ice Body does exist. The next move on the list is, I do believe this to be very, very wishful thinking, as I am personally very fond of this move in the mainline series, but it is Freeze Dry. But I think that this could operate similar in nature to Delphox's Fire Spin, not in the it seeks out to trap you, but rather it is a designated area. If the target is in the area, it traps them, and it deals damage, freezing or stunning them for a period of time. The reason why I believe Freeze Dry could be added is that it is a fairly remote move. Very few Pokemon actually learn this move. Many of them are actually legendaries in the form of, well, Kyurem, Articuno, or are Pokemon I don't believe realistically would be added to the game, like Glalie or Lapras. Glaceon is a very unique Pokemon in that respect of it gets this fairly remote move, which acts very different to other Ice-type moves. Most Ice moves involve throwing some sort of snow or ice at the target, whereas Freeze Dry is just manifesting freezing in front of it. Icy Wind, again, we are getting into the less likely territory now, I think would operate similar to Alola Vulpix's Icy Wind, but just a little more powerful, maybe a little larger in terms of area, just because it is a fully leveled move rather than a base starting attack. Further into the rabbit hole of lesser likely moves, we have Ice Fang. The only reason I realistically feel Ice Fang could be added is as some sort of a dash, as generally dashes do make characters far more powerful and significantly more mobile, and generally Pokemon these days have some form of mobility boost. Could act a bit like Zero Aura Slash, or potentially like Flame Charge for something like Talonflame, where it increases the speed for a while after, or again, like Zero Aura Slash, it could be a Seek Out and Grab attack. Again, likely it would have some sort of freeze effect. Ice Shard, again, even further into less likely ones, potentially could operate as a linear ranged attack, but I don't think this is overly likely. On the far end of how I think it could operate, I think it could operate a bit like a shield, where the Ice Shards are orbiting around Glaceon and essentially deal damage to attacking opponents. But I don't really think this is possible because that's really not how Ice Shard works. But again, Unite changes a lot of move effects and animations to suit its more unique playstyle. I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely. As mentioned before, I believe all of these moves will have some sort of stun, freeze, or slowdown effect akin to Alola Ninetales and Mamoswine's icing effects that they have. Again, this is why I feel that it could be more suited as a defender. Think of how Mamoswine's moves, if they are used around its goal, freeze the goal to make it harder for enemies to score. Something similar like that could be applied to Glaceon so that it can be, well, making it harder for enemies to score while being a bit more offense-based. Again, I know it's a bit out there, but I think it's realistically possible. So I guess the best way to say it is like a hybrid of Alola Ninetales with Espeon and Sylveon is more my theory for how it could potentially work. But now we go to passives and Unite moves. I think a passive such as, well, Snow Cloak would be what it would have, operating very similar to Magic Bounce, where it negates hindrances for a short time and it's on a cooldown, not necessarily reflect them back at the caster, but just make it immune. Ice Body, I believe, would operate either akin to Queenly Majesty, which is actually very similar to Ice Body, but a little bit different. I have a little bit of reason why I think it's a little different. Operating the first part of Queenly Majesty by reducing the effect of hindrances rather than outright negating them, and applying a sort of move bonus, like the second effect of Queenly Majesty, where after using certain moves, you gain either health or just another effect happens. The reason I believe this to happen is that, as of late, many abilities that Pokemon have as passives have operated very similarly to, well, the abilities and passives of previous Pokemon. For a Unite move, keeping in with the way in which Eevee, Espeon, and Sylveon have been, where they are circular around the caster and actually have relatively similar size, I've actually measured out, they do look relatively similar in area, I think we can receive a circular AoE effect on Glaceon's Unite move to keep it in line with the thematics of the Eevee line. And at risk of saying it's just a bit of a carbon copy of Alola Ninetales, I think rather than a burst around the user, as well as the also range of Alola Ninetales, as Alola Ninetales is actually significantly larger, I think it would be a more prolonged effect around Glaceon for a few seconds, again operating akin to, well, Espeon's, but being able to move while doing it. Again, I know this is sounding a lot like previous things I suggested for moves, whereas I suggested an option for Blizzard or Hail is just circular area around the user, akin to Petal Dance or Discharge on Zero Aura. But I think it is a bit more reasonable for this to be its Unite move. Hail is a move that I thought could potentially be happening because of course, Snow Cloak. or Ice Bite. I also think it would have the slowdown or potential freeze effect that we have discussed prior. So it would not just be a bit of an upgraded carbon copy of Alola Ninetales. But that is all I really have to say about this. I'm actually excited to see Glaceon potentially be an attacker. I do see real potential as a defender. I think at best, we could have a wholly unique attacker-defender hybrid that is, well, much more suited to being an attacker with either extra bulk or mobility, rather than a heavily support-based like Alola Ninetales, to, at worst, pretty much a strict upgrade of Alola Ninetales. I don't think they realistically will go the route of being a strict Alola Ninetales upgrade due to the rather unique kit Alola Ninetales has, but I think a bit of a hybrid Espeon Sylveon Alola Ninetales is the more realistic outcome. But let me know what you guys think in the description below. Have a wonderful day, and let me know what you guys thought. Till next time, let's rock and roll out. And don't forget to leave a subscribe if you want to see more things like this, where we tackle many more discussion videos.